In the darkest worlds that ever were, the only thing that brings light are stories. Those stories are kept in one place, the tiny bookcase. It wasn't until I'd finished making it I found that zouk paste is made of cilantro. What a time to be alive.
That must have made it taste really strange, Ysterris.
What's zouk paste, Ben?
I don't know. Apparently it's got cilantro in it.
Right. Enough about recipes. I want more stories, boys. Who else have you had in?
Absolute ton of people.
And, if I'm honest, I'm glad you've asked. All right. Who have you got for me? Well, it was around that time we were visited by Omar El-Akkad, former journalist and story master.
On my way to cut God's tongue, I pass a long, shuffling line of laborers. Men mostly. The younger ones nurse hangovers and bar-fight bruises, Denton-colored stains on their shirts, maps of imaginary islands. It is a rule at the entropy mill that the laborers must all be dressed in reasonably presentable attire, but I've never heard of anyone turned away on account of how they look. The older men tend to take too much care with their appearance. There's something grotesque about watching a stooped retiree in his best Sunday suit, his hair dyed and gelled to shining, plead for a day's wage. They look so much older than they are, these men. The years gorge on them like yeast in a sugar bath. I glance at them as I walk past. I wonder how many of them have children. I wonder how many of them are mean. The line stretches for miles and miles and miles. It always does. It used to be a mega mall back before the crash. The largest one in the country, I'm told, though that was years before my time. Even now, you can still see the phantom outline on the sides of some of the buildings, the places where the lettering was, the names of all those big box stores, movie theaters, and parking garages, this congealed mass of commerce the size of a small city. Now the whole thing houses the entropy mill, 5 million square feet of government-subsidized employment. Every day, thousands of people come to this place to churn out numbers for minimum wage, to make the slop on which God's tongue feasts. By the time I get to the front entrance, the makeup of the line has changed. There are more women near the front. They sit on folding chairs draped in winter coats and blankets. The only way to make sure you get a spot is to show up the night before and wait till morning. A few of the people in line give me dirty looks as I walk past, and one of them points at my laptop satchel and yells, "No bags!" But it's not until I'm right at the entrance that a young man steps out in front of me and grabs me by the shoulder. "You just gonna walk in?" he says. "Back of the line, buddy." I shake my head. "I'm not here for that," I say. "The hell you ain't. Back of the line." I know that look he's got. I know it from memory. And I know what's going to happen next, but I try to step around him anyway. There's no point appealing to reason. You can't rid a man of the violence that lives in the chasm between the life he hoped for and the one he got. I've never been any good at taking a punch. Glass jaw, they call it. I drop to the ground, a dribble of pinkish spit leaking out my mouth, that familiar mineral taste. He's got strong hands. I don't understand how men get strong hands working at the entropy mill. In my periphery, I see a couple of security guards come running over. "Tech support," I say. I'm here on a maintenance call." Both guards ignore me. Instead, they grab the young man who punched me and start dragging him towards the street. He puts up a pretty good fight, arguing he's been waiting here 8 hours, and it's the guy who cut in line that should be booted. It doesn't look like he's going to back down, until one of the guards pulls out his phone and tries to take the man's picture. That's when he turns and runs. No one wants to end up on the blacklist. The guards don't give chase. They turn and walk back, and on the way one of them helps me up. I show her my ID. You knew? She asks. Yeah, I say. First call. She shakes her head. Never come through the front gate, she says. That's just for them. She leads me inside, and after she checks my name against the maintenance manifest, she has me walk through the metal detector and into the massive central rotunda. I've seen pictures of it, but never like this. The workers haven't been let in yet, and the place has about it an almost apocalyptic emptiness. All the workstations pristine and untouched. The wires and electrodes and number pads arranged neatly at each desk. The only sound is the faint wheeze of the air conditioners and the squeak of our shoes against the polished floor. In an hour or two, the rooms will fill with the noise and heat of thousands, but for now the entropy mill is cold. We walk through the rotunda and down one of the hallways, past the workrooms. The walls are all glass, and I can guess at some of the jobs that go on inside. One room is lined with tall bookshelves. I imagine this is where the word counting happens. In another room, I see headphones on the tables. It must be one of the music stations. That was my father's favorite job. I used to pray he'd get assigned the music station. There's entropy mills in all the big cities now, but this was the first. The original make-work project in the years after the crash wiped out a third of all the blue-collar jobs in the country. Every day, 3.5 million people come to the mills to churn out numbers. It's the easiest work. Anyone can do it. You don't need a degree or references or previous experience. Depending on the day, you might be assigned to the biometrics unit and have a machine dream up numbers based on the topography of your fingerprints or the blood vessels running across your retina. Another day, you might be told to swallow a small capsule that sits in your stomach and sends back a real-time count of the bacteria in your gut. Another day, you might be told to put on an electrode helmet and listen to Mozart, as all the while the electrodes measure the changes in activity across the right side of the frontal lobe, the places the music sets on fire. And from these changes generates a stream of digits. Most of the time you just sit there, let the wires pull the numbers right out of you, a strange, corrupted dreaming. In an endless stream, all these billions of digits the workers generate are funneled down to the box in the basement, down to God's tongue. And from these numbers, God's tongue forms its own secret language and speaks unpredictable things. As stipulated in the Great Recovery Act, any company that uses random numbers must purchase them from an entropy mill. Academics, cryptographers, drug makers, anyone whose business demands mathematical uncertainty. Every bank in the country is a customer, as is every casino. There's a video game studio whose vast, procedurally generated universe feeds on these numbers. Somewhere in the math department at a university upstate, there's a server that queries God's tongue at the rate of 2 or 3 billion digits an hour, part of a quest to find the new largest prime. In reality, the numbers that come out of the entropy mill are not completely random. There is a determinism to it, no matter how difficult to decipher. In reality, a gram of cesium would do a better job, but a gram of cesium won't feed 3.5 million families. I've wanted for so long to see it. My father spent 31 years in this place, showed up hungover and bar fight bruised, left in his Sunday suit and his hair gel-shined. 31 years and he never saw it. I follow the guard to the restricted area, past a set of vault-thick doors and into the electrical and mechanical rooms. We take a service elevator down to the basement. The doors open and there it is, a modular cube of black disk drive holders and winking green and red diodes. It's a little bigger than the simulator we used in training, the room a little warmer, the smell of ozone a little thicker in the air. I feel a kind of distant nausea settle in. It's just a gaggle of rectangular servers. I wanted it to be something more than this. I wanted for a fight. I remove my laptop from my satchel and kneel by one of the input ports. I plug my machine in. I enter the password, my password. They're going to know it was me, but it doesn't matter. The guard stands nearby, bored, checking her phone. So what's wrong with it anyway, she asks. Yesterday it spit out a string of 19 fives in a row, I say. That triggered a service call. So it's broken? No, it's not broken, I say. It's not anything. I skip past the diagnostic menu. I find the code repository, the thing you're taught never to touch unless all hell breaks loose. I upload my changes, the new dialect I am to make God's tongue learn. I imagine there'd be some failsafe, some impenetrable wall. But it's easy. It takes no time at all. 96 trillion, I say. The guard looks up from her phone. What? 96 trillion, give or take. That's how many numbers my father fed this thing. She looks at me, uncertain. She doesn't know. She'll piece it together later when it's too late. Did you have a good childhood? I ask her. Sure, I guess. That's good. I unplug my laptop. That matters. We leave the server room. When we return to the rotunda, the workers are just starting to stream in. They take their seats and begin their busy work, their invisible shedding. I think about this time tomorrow, when God's tongue adopts my language and turns mute, when all it can utter is an endless string of zeros, and all the industries reliant upon it come to a grinding halt. I imagine the sound it'll make, a choking. A long time ago, on one of his good days, my father told me about a workstation they used to have at the mill. 2 people at a time were told to sit and talk to one another about anything at all. A microphone listened in. It was never quite clear what it was listening for. Some of the workers guessed the machine counted phonemes or syllables, or perhaps the length of pauses between words. It seemed at first a good addition to the rounds. All the workers had to do was talk to one another, which they mostly did anyway. But soon it became clear that when expected to converse, many of the men became awkward and self-conscious, and too often ended up getting into arguments that sometimes turned violent. You can't do that to a man, my father said. Rub it in like that. I didn't understand what he meant back then, but I think I do now. It's important to do work of which you can be proud.
What a fascinating chap.
He really is. His novel, American War, is an international bestseller. It won the Kobo Emerging Writer Prize, the Pacific Northwest Booksellers Award, and the Oregon Book Award. It was selected as one of the best books of the year by the New York Times and a bunch of other really high-profile magazines and papers. It was chosen by the BBC as one of the 100 novels that changed our world.
Okay.
He's big stuff. He's also got a new novel coming out 20th of July, What Strange Paradise. It's the story of 2 children finding their way through a hostile world. But it is also a story of empathy, indifference, hope and despair, and about the way each of those things can blind us to reality. We're looking forward to it. Next, we were joined by fellow podcaster Tonya Ransom for some more horror.
When I die, you'll be the next to receive the family recipe. Promise me you'll honor it, she said, gasping for breath. Those were my mother's last words to me, not I love you or it'll be okay. Just checking with me to make sure I understood that I would be responsible for the family recipe in the coming hours, making sure that I would carry on our legacy. That's how important that little slip of paper is to my kin. More important than motherly love or reassurance, more important than the very air we breathe. The location and code to the box were in my mother's will. Only I was allowed to see it. She didn't even hire a lawyer to write up the document. She did one of those self-service templates to ensure our secret was safe. As instructed, I burned the paper with the sensitive information when I was done. I was now, well and truly, our family's keeper. I sat beside my mother's body, a shell of what she once was, and carefully dialed the right numbers that would open the box that held the sacred knowledge that had been passed down for at least a dozen generations. As I expected, there was an envelope inside that contained our family's secret. In my mother's careful handwriting, it read simply, "Recipe." But there was more in the box. Teeth, lots of them, and a blade, sharp and gleaming. Beneath that, a piece of paper, an inventory list. This box contains the following. Number 1, teeth of your ancestors. Number 2, the family blade. Number 3, the family recipe. I understood the blade. The special meal we always served after funerals was meat, thinly sliced, expertly seasoned and roasted. Looking forward to that meal had always taken the sting out of losing a loved one. We'd sit in a pew and cry, barely able to see the urn at the front of the church through our tears, our mouths watering for that comforting taste we'd come to associate with grief and togetherness. I did not understand the teeth. I hoped what was in the envelope would clear that up for me. I considered using the blade to open the envelope, but decided against it. It seemed blasphemous somehow to use something so special on paper. Plus, I'd heard somewhere that paper dulls blades quickly. I stepped away from my mother's corpse to find a letter opener, returned to her, and slid the blade in, carefully opening the envelope. Inside was a slip of paper, yellowed, ink faded, but traced over carefully to ensure the recipe wouldn't be lost to time. There was also a letter, far more recent. The paper was still white and crisp. I unfolded it to reveal my mother's handwriting. Dear daughter, I am sorry to say that it is now your duty to safeguard this recipe and to prepare our family's funeral feasts. Sorry? I wondered, but continued reading. As you know, this recipe is not to be revealed to anyone until you pass on, at which time you will leave this box to a female relative younger than you, but the oldest of our clan. You are probably wondering about the teeth. What you must do now will not be pleasant, but it must be done. If you do not carry out this task, our family will perish. Everyone. It's part of a deal made long ago. Long before you or I were born. Long before this country even existed. I'm sorry, but you do not have a choice. The first thing you'll need to do is remove one of my molars. A pair of pliers works great for this, but you will need to apply a great deal of force. Place that molar in this box. Then you will take the blade and flay the flesh from my body. I dropped the letter, looked at my mother, at peace at last, my own heart hammering hard enough for the both of us. I bent over to retrieve the page with shaky hands. Everyone has their own method for this. I researched how to field dress a deer to learn, but there is no right or wrong way, so long as you get as much meat from my bones as possible. You're a nurse, so your anatomy knowledge will be useful for this step, thankfully. You won't struggle as much as I did my first time. Once you have the meat, follow the recipe to the letter. Measure carefully. It's imperative that you are exact. Set a timer on the oven. Again, our family's existence depends upon your ability to prepare me properly. I am truly sorry it had to be you. I love you with my entire soul and being. Mom. I looked again at my mom, grabbed the blade, and smiled. She wasn't as good at keeping secrets as she thought she was. I'd been waiting for this day for a long time.
Well, I'm more of an expert on spellcasting than podcasting, but couldn't tell me a little more about Tonya, could you? We can, and more about our podcast. So, Tonya created and produces the Nightlight podcast, which is an all-black horror podcast. Black writers, black performers. It is absolutely stunning stuff. I'd really highly recommend checking it out. Not long after that, we were visited by a man with death in his very name, Graham Mort.
The tide was out, leaving a slope of mud, the lip of a crater. It was another nothing day. Sea and sky merged, so there was no horizon. The concrete blocks of the power station were hidden in mist that formed seed pearls on her jacket. She threw the stick, and the dog ran for it, a Welsh Springer that was getting too old for all this. The dog came back with the stick covered in saliva and dropped it at her feet. She threw it again, and the dog ran after it. Then again, until it became distracted, pawing at the sand, worrying at something in a pool of water that gleamed with sky. Pauline took out a paper hanky to wipe her glasses, and it fell apart in her fingers. Taff! The dog shook its head and went back to work. Taffy! She put a warning note in her voice, the way she'd let the kids at school know she meant business. And the dog was back, carrying a red shoe in its mouth, which it laid at her feet. Then it sat down watching her, its tongue hanging crooked, the colour of tinned salmon. It was Bill's dog, really, not something she'd ever wanted. Pauline clipped the lead on him and crouched down. It was a woman's shoe, patent leather with a moderate heel. There was a bow at the front. It was a court shoe, nothing fancy, so the bow seemed incongruous, like someone's face caught between expressions. They were the sort of shoes that might have seemed like a good idea at the time. The sort that got worn once for a wedding, that went back into a box at the bottom of the wardrobe. Or they'd been dangled overboard on a warmer day than this, as a woman sipped chilled wine and watched her lover trim the sails. Or they'd been kicked free as the sea closed over her head, hair streaming upwards, bubbles of air bursting from salt water. They said that those who died for love always changed their minds and fought to surface. But those who died in debt went straight to the bottom. Though love and debt were hard to distinguish. She picked up the shoe for some reason, let some slack out of the lead, so the dog followed behind. They took the path past Sambo's grave, a faithful Negro who, attending his master from the West Indies, died on his arrival at Sunderland. There was a little shrine of painted pebbles, then that poem written by a retired schoolmaster. They said he died heartsick when his master didn't return. As if there weren't 1,000 other things to die from: fever, scurvy, the pox, captivity. Pauline tapped the shoe on the flat stone, and a few grains of sand fell into the inscription. Pauline got the dog into the back of the car, where it sat in its cage on an old towel. Then she drove out over the causeway. There were ruined fishing boats abandoned in the fields, rotting down into the silt. Lancaster Castle was a dark clot above the city, and she could make out the white dome of the Ashton Memorial beside the Butterfly House. A folly built to commemorate love. One thing the Victorians understood was death, brevity, the stealth of the undercurrent. The dog lurched and whimpered as she braked. The tidal gullies were running with water and coils of mud. They looked like the tracks of sea serpents, those mythical beasts that spirited local girls away to another life. The shoe was on the seat beside her. She'd been to Wigan Casino once, before Bill, with a boy from Galgate who was about to go to university. Theo. He was 2 years older than her. He had Bob Dylan curls, and he was so cool that she trembled when she was near him. They danced all night before driving home in his dad's Dolomite. She danced in her red baseball boots, watching the boys in loose trousers and crop tops spin into the vortex of themselves, before they went back to who they had to be. She was letting go, moving to the pulse of Detroit, the automobile gleam of America, the sheen of the future. Theo must have taken something. His pupils were wide and dark. He'd tried to kiss her when he dropped her off, but it was 2 a.m. and her mum would be waiting. She'd pulled away. His breath smelled of cigarettes. The next time she passed him, he was leaving a cafe in town, an undergraduate in a duffel coat covered in CND badges. Then Bill, who already had a good job at Hesham, keeping the reactor going, those isotopes, whatever they were called, endlessly dividing. An electrical engineer who couldn't dance and didn't want to, but who could build a radio transmitter from scratch. A man who knew his own mind. Then her own job, teaching primary kids, until she was teaching the kids of kids. She pulled into the driveway and let the dog out. It cocked its leg against the laurel. The shoes had left a dark stain on the seat. When she unlocked the door, the house met her with a wave of heat, that smell they'd got used to. She shut the dog in the kitchen, where it would sleep and slobber and fart in its basket, then went through into the house. Bill was in the conservatory, in his wheelchair. Tartan slippers, the oxygen cylinder on hand, his cup of tea gone cold and milky. She turned off the TV and put the red shoe on the little table next to his blister packs of pills. He woke then, confused by the quiet, pushing at the plastic tube under his nose. There was dried soap in his stubble. He looked at the shoe as if he didn't understand. Then he looked at Pauline as if he might. He half raised his hand and seemed to want to speak, struggling for breath, but then let it fall. He tried to smile for her, as if there was still time. A red shoe. One of a pair.
Well, that could shake life into anyone's bones. Tell me more of this death man.
Graham Mort was fantastic. We had such a great conversation with him about writing and life and everything in between. But you can actually check out some more of Graham Mort's fiction by picking up his books Touch and Terroir. He's also recently published an anthology of short fiction, which he was very excited to talk to us about on the podcast. It's titled Like Fado and Other Stories. Then we were joined by Aaliyah Whiteley.
Toxic. This is my potion, and it smells. Swimming pool and petrol with the tang of animal. It wafts through my south-facing kitchen, uncurling from my favourite mug. I've made this potion from things ordered online, things found around the house, things found dead on the road. I've opened crusted bottles from under sinks. I fed body parts through my blender. Stirring these undrinkable ingredients together reminded me of a game I used to play when I was very young. I made a drink, I would say to my father, it's for you. A cap of shampoo mixed with a dollop of Marmite, whatever I could get my hands on. He would pretend to swallow it down. Yum, yum, yum. I would watch the thin line of his lips pressed together so tightly as he tilted the plastic cup to his face. Now you've got superpowers, I'd say. I have dreamed of transformation. Long have I been a normal girl. Everyone suffers and succeeds but me. Oh, to be a different thing. No, wait, I don't want to be different. I want to be super, to take all the boring pieces of me and make one satisfying, strong, beyond belief woman. Right now, I am a commute and a weekly clean-up of my semi-detached. I am a solemn whip round with the duster. I am a streaming service and a takeaway treat and late-night lonely tears, and I am the desire to escape this place and myself. Come on, potion. Merge all these pieces into one spectacular super whole. I hold the mug in my hands. I will find the courage to drink it down. Any moment now. Any moment now. It's a spring afternoon. The sun is bright on the black and white squares of lino, and the radio is playing 80s pop. The smell is still the worst thing I have ever smelled, and the look is not too appealing either. Thick brown sludge with chunky bits. A layer of slime has solidified on top. To drink or not to drink? My father played Hamlet in a school production. He liked the stage, but preferred to be a businessman. Money over masochism, he told me once. That was the kind of thing he used to say, but that was all a performance too. Yum, yum, yum. Nowadays, I prefer my heroes modern and muscled. Bring on the captains and gods, those who fly and favour a cape. Maybe the potion will give me a laser beam stare and an origin story beyond the normal. I'll discover I'm from another planet, long destroyed. Well, I suspected that already. The thing about the act of drinking is this. It requires freedom of self, like talking, like screaming, making any noise. Letting things out and letting things in demands a looseness of the throat, and for the longest time I didn't have it. Everyone had to join the school choir. Sing up, my teacher would say, but I felt the words lodged in my neck, each one a blockage. I wanted to find out I was a singer, a pop superstar even. That's as close as we get to hero status in this world, right? But when did I manage to force out the sounds? They were high and whiny. Nothing much has changed, right? I'm approaching this life all wrong, right? Enough questions, enough memories twisted to fit my agenda. The smell. Hold the nose and down it goes. Yum, yum, yum. My mouth is a thin line. I understand my father better now, those pressed lips, that stiff neck, but I will overcome it. It takes an effort of extraordinary will to unclench my jaw. Open, open wide, I demand of myself, and the liquid floods in. Swallow one, swallow two. I contain my potion, and I taste. Blood and guts and puke and bleach and bile and something lumpy. I taste harshness and hope and the tang of horror. The prickle of fur pushing out from my pores is a torture. My nails are straining in their beds, turning my fingers to curved claws. I rip at my clothes and shred them from my twisting legs, hardened and hollowed. My stomach wrenches, my hair burns, my windpipe dissolves, and I am transforming, transformed. I throw down the empty mug. The handle breaks on the black and white tiles. I stand in my kitchen, bright sunlight still shining, and I breathe deeply. The air has cleared. It smells wonderful. I am no longer an ordinary girl. I am a mixture of things found and things stirred, of the awful and the unswallowable. Everything within me is churning and burning to reach this one truth. I am not Hamlet. I'm not waiting to be a hero. I don't need a stage or an audience. I will be my own worst creation. This is an origin story made in a suburban semi-detached by a boring life that never came together. I've taken all the parts of this and made a majestic monster. And now I will lumber out into the world to wreak havoc with my fur standing proud. I collect my coat and handbag from the hall. I turn left and head for the high street, and I smile at everyone I pass. It's the smile of a supervillain. I wonder why they smile back instead of running for the hills, running as far away as they can get before I eat them whole. Yum, yum, yum. Can't they smell me coming? I'm toxic.
Absolutely fascinating. And you say she summons her works in a coffee shop? That's not really summoning. It's only you that cheats when you're creating books, Ysterris. Alia does write in a coffee shop, and she has written a lot in there. Her newest novel, Greensmith, it deals with seed banks and viruses and the global threat to diversity, all told through a little planty filter. She's got a story collection coming up soon as well, called From the Neck Up, which will be available in September, I believe. Another one from across the pond, then. High Up and Far Away, Sue Burke.
I see a vision. A wall of water is going to crash like an avalanche through the city over buildings and people. It will break them. It will drown them. It will leave bodies strewn like flotsam amid the rubble. I run screaming to the market. A great wave is coming. Flee now. A woman selling fish sneers. The gods have told you this? Poseidon speaks to you? We can see the water from here. The sea is calm. The sea is false. The sea is lying. The market is crowded. The port of Falara is busy. And yet to me, it all looks like ruins. Tears stream down my face. A wave is coming. A baker looks at me from the doorway of his shop. Demons, he mutters. No, it is revenge. I cursed Poseidon, and he cursed me in return. He has made me know things, true things. The woman selling fish abandoned her ill husband in another province of Greece. The baker has a cache of coins buried next to his oven. They scorn me, but I do not hate them. I hate Poseidon. I want to deny him his victims. We must flee. Run now. No one looks my way. Have they all suddenly gone deaf? Is this Another trick of that god. You should flee, Harridan. People laughed. They were listening. They see me tear out my hair. Some of them know me, know that my husband and family were lost last month to a shipwreck. They know I am mad with grief, haunted by the god of the sea. A wave is coming. I flee as fast as my old legs can run out of the city, past the vineyards, and halfway up the highest hill. A dark line rises on the sea at the horizon. I close my eyes, but I have already seen what will happen. When Poseidon has finished his devastation, I return, passing bodies carried up into the vineyards, climbing over rubble, wading through stinking pools filled with ashes and trash, and there, next to the baker's oven where the soil has washed away, is a leather purse, and inside it, I know, will be silver. I shriek at the sea, the water now calm and stained brown by its plunder. Take this curse from me! And suddenly, I stand among a crowd of people on a hillock overlooking a long beach. The sea rages in a storm. Wind drives cold raindrops like needles into my face, and Poseidon howls, jubilant at imminent death. Again, I know what will happen. I know this place too, this wild seashore. I have lived here since I was a lass, the word they use here in Ireland for girl. We live conquered by the people of the neighboring isle, Britain, which now wages war against Spain. The defeated Spanish ships sail past us, en route to escape. Or rather, they try to sail through the storm. Their captains do not know these waters, these shores, and their cliffs, and they sail lost. We are forbidden to help them as we watch Poseidon drive them aground. Wood rends against rocks. Men scream into the smashing waves. Hundreds of voices crying out with their last breaths. I wail like the banshee I am, and banshees are respected here. British soldiers hunch through the wind to capture survivors who will be strung up on gallows, but a few survivors will wash ashore farther down amid the rushes, and I will send our men to help them escape. Madness is a thing of the gods, and those who worship mad gods. Madness is no longer mine. My curse is immortality. And so I am tormented, life after life, by Poseidon's earthquakes, monsters, floods, drownings, and wrecks. Life after life, I fight back, each time with the skills that the passing centuries give me to use. Navigator, doctor, admiral, meteorologist, seismologist, hydrologist, and oceanographer. I learn his tricks and how to defeat them. I save lives. But everywhere he can, he manifests to mock me. As I plan a barrier across the River Thames to guard London against storm surges from the sea, the ground shakes beneath me, the building rattles, my chair tips, and I fly backwards. My coworkers felt nothing. As I install a seismometer as part of Japan's earthquake early warning system, I return to my car and find it filled with water. The police vow to discover the vandal, but do not notice the gods' bubbling laughter. As I examine maps and weather data to predict the path of a hurricane, the wind in my mind shrieks like 10,000 doomed souls that only I can hear. I vow to work through my deafness to save every soul. Humanity's mastery of the physical world grows to encompass the Earth and beyond. As I work at a space station, I discover I am outside Poseidon's realm and reach. For the first time in well more than 2,000 years, my God-haunted ears enjoy silence. In space, no one can hear ancient Earth gods scream. In that peace, I devise a plan to undo the curse and avenge myself. Step by step, life by life, my work continues. Now I serve aboard a spaceship, a small, spry vessel with a pioneer crew of 6 flitting around an ice asteroid as large as a glacier. We are orbiting the planet Mars. The asteroid is one of many icy behemoths gently prodded year after year from the asteroid belt toward the red planet. The pilot points to a sonar projection. Here's a fault line, she says. We can break off a piece here. I get to work setting the laser array. Ready? A burst hits deep within the crevice, and water explodes into vapor. Step by step, nudge by nudge, pieces break off and fall toward the planet. They will evaporate into the atmosphere, which grows steadily thicker and cloudier. In some places, it already rains on Mars. In a few places, water flows again, collecting into ponds. Eventually, Mars will have oceans. I glance up at Earth, that blue marble ruled by a mad water god. My curse on him has come true. He is trapped in the gravity well of that planet, where little by little, humans whittle away at his power. I have escaped to create a rival secular sea. I mutter, "Your games are getting old." He cannot hear me, but he can see what I am doing as Mars slowly turns as blue as Earth. I am not like a god who plays with mortal lives as if they were toys. Here, he can no longer force rebirth on me when my lifetime comes to its natural end. My anger has turned to pity. I send him a prayer. "Oh, great Poseidon, change your ways. Learn from me. You too have the power to refashion a world into a blessing and a wonderland."
Well, that got out of hand quickly, didn't it? There's all of her stuff like that, so expensive.
Expansive and exciting. Semiosis is a novel of first contact, a multi-generational story about colonists on a planet where plants are the dominant life forms, and they see animals, including humans, as their pawns. The second book in the series is Interference, and both are available now. Sue Burke's latest novel is titled Immunity Index, and the novel blends the style and feel of Orphan Black with Contagion in a terrifying outbreak scenario, something which strikes very close to home for us this past year. The next guest to bring an offering for a tiny shelf on a tiny bookcase, Ysterris, was A.C. Wise.
Objectively, the dress is beautiful. Fine ribs in the bodice will support and reshape her. Thousands of seed pearls shimmer from waist to hem, and the belled skirt layered with silk, chiffon, and lace appears weightless. Subjectively, the dress is a horror, a prison, a trap. She wants nothing to do with it. But she is a princess. She is the eldest. The king has no male heir. She must be wed. In the quietest part of night, the eldest princess and her sisters talk of the future. Their beds form a circle around the room's perimeter, and the dress looms in the corner, a phantom, an omen, watching over the sisters as they speak. "I never want to be wed," says the youngest middle sister. "I want to be a knight and go on adventures. I want my own bright polished armor and magical sword. I want ballads sung about me, slaying dragons and bringing home their treasure so no one in our realm will ever go hungry again." "Humph," says the oldest middle sister. "Well, I want to be a dragon, so you'd better just find something else to slay." "Oh." The youngest middle sister looks abashed. "Well, perhaps I could slay trolls instead? They have rather a lot of treasure, don't they? Unless—" She lets her words trail, lest any of her other sisters proclaim a sudden desire to become trolls. The The middle sister waves a dismissive hand. That's all well and good, but I intend to be a witch. I'll cast powerful spells to help those who deserve it, and curse those who don't. I'll have dozens of animal familiars, and everyone will be in awe of me. People will wonder what I'm up to, but I'll only give them a mysterious smile as I pass by, so they'll be a little afraid of me as well. I'd like to be a baker, says the youngest. I'll make the most wonderful cakes, 15 layers high, one in every flavor, and people will weep for joy when they taste them. My bread will remind people of home. My scones will instantly turn enemies into friends, and my pies will make it so that people always remember to say sorry to those they've wronged. The second to youngest sister blushes and fidgets with the hem of her nightgown. A husband might not be so bad, she says, looking down. Or perhaps a wife? I haven't decided yet. Maybe one of each, just to be sure? Or perhaps I want to be somebody else's husband. Is that allowed? Oh, it's so hard to decide. The twisting of her nightgown grows more agitated until the second to eldest sister pats the second to youngest on the knee and says, You have plenty of time to decide, and you can change your mind as many times as you like, as long as you do your best not to hurt anyone. The second to youngest sister beams, relieved, while the second to eldest sister turns to the eldest, the one whose dress looms in the corner, upon whom the weight of the kingdom rests. What about you? The second to eldest asks. The two are nearly twins, born only 10 months apart. They've always had a special bond. You haven't said yet either, the eldest answers, blinking back tears, voice hoarse as she tries to maintain control. Oh, I expect I'll travel, the second to eldest replies airily, then leans forward. But you must tell us what you want. Yes, do. A look passes between the sisters, quick and bright, which makes the eldest's heart fill with hope and then immediately tumble with fear. She's not allowed to want anything. Don't her sisters understand? She has no hopes for her future, no plans, only responsibilities. What she wants doesn't enter into it at all. Tell us, says the middle sister, and there's such a softness to her voice, such a gentleness that the eldest sister breaks. Tears spill, and she buries her face in her hands. I want to be a castle, she says. Even now, among her sisters, it seems too strange a thing to admit aloud. Her sisters all want to be warm, living things, but her desire to be a building feels beyond the pale. Yet it has been her dearest wish for as long as she can recall, since the first moment she looked up to the walls of their own castle. She wants to be graceful towers, precise crenellations, pennants snapping in the wind, ramparts and portcullis and grey stone piled upon stone, all speaking to defense, strength, keeping everything and everyone she loves safe inside. She wants to be vast and quiet. She wants to grow room upon room, one for each of her sisters. For her oldest middle sister, she will hollow out an underground cavern fit for a dragon and her horde. For her youngest middle sister, she will sprout an armory, bristling with magical weapons. Her middle sister shall have the highest tower, crammed with books and platforms and perches and niches for all of her familiars. The youngest shall have the finest kitchen in the land, while the second to youngest will have a suite of rooms to fill with as many husbands and wives as she chooses, or none at all. And her almost twin, the next to oldest, shall have a key and the light left on, so she will always know she has a place to rest whenever she returns from her travels. But none of this is possible, for she is a princess and the eldest, and marriage is her fate. We understand, the youngest says, taking the eldest's hand. And we'll help you, says the next to youngest. How? Her sister's kindness breaks the eldest's heart, but all the more so because it feels naive, too impossible, and therefore cruel. One doesn't simply become a witch overnight, her middle sister says, quirking her lips into a mysterious and knowing smile. It requires years of practice. As does being a dragon, says the oldest middle sister. Or a questing knight, says the youngest middle. We've all been preparing, gathering, learning, brewing, and we know just what to do. The eldest looks from face to face in wonder, in confusion. The youngest sister produces a round-bottomed flask, stopped with a cork and wax, filled with liquid that looks a little bit like granite-made water, shimmering and swirling in the light. I mixed this up in the kitchen, says the youngest. According to my instructions, says the middle sister. With ingredients we journeyed far and wide to gather, say the youngest, middle, and the second oldest sisters together. Including dragon scale, says the oldest middle sister proudly. And a bit of advice from some friends I know, says the second to youngest sister, blushing. What is it? The eldest sister asks. It's a fortification potion, her almost twin responds. Quite literally, the middle sister once more favors them with a wry and mysterious smile. Whenever you're ready, says the second eldest. The tears overflowing the eldest's eyes are tears of gratitude now as her sisters wind their arms around her, a castle of skin and bone, keeping her safe, keeping her protected. I'm ready now, she says. The eldest sister snatches the wedding dress from its hook on the wall, and all together the sisters sneak outside to sprint across the lawn. Once they are far enough away, the eldest sister kisses each of her sisters in turn. Thank you, and thank you, and thank you, she says to each of them. Whatever you choose in your lives, I know you'll all be brilliant, and no matter what happens, you will always have a home. Clutching the wedding dress close, she swallows the potion down. Her bones harden inside her skin, growing new vaulted ribs to support and reshape her. Crenellations sharpen against the night sky, fluttering with pennants seeded with pearls, made of lace and chiffon and silk. She sprouts towers, almost too many to count, and the chambers of her heart become chambers for every one of her sisters, each according to their dreams. The eldest sister is happy. She is fortified, safe, steady, strong, and vast enough to contain everyone she loves, whatever their future may bring.
Well, wise by name and wise by nature, she was rather nice. She really is. Her debut novel, which came out recently, is called Wendy Darling. It's a lush, feminist reimagining of what happens to Wendy post-Neverland. It started as a piece of short fiction and grew into something absolutely brilliant. Wise also has a horror short story collection on the way, which is called The Ghost Sequences, and if what we got in short form here was anything to go by, it's going to be great. Next, we had some truly wild energy from Shiv Ramdas.
Crossroads. How much longer? The taxi driver sighs. I told you, 5 minutes. That was 2 minutes ago. Can you go faster? The driver, a big burly Sikh, rolls his eyes. You know I can see you doing that, right? In your mirror. Then stop looking in my mirror. Actually, you know what? Just sit back as well. You're breathing on the back of my neck. Oh, sorry. I comply and sit back, watching the Madhya Pradesh countryside flying past us, green and brown and mundane as ever. Not where I'd have picked to set up shop, but then again, I'm not a demon. What's your issue anyway, says the driver. In response, I touch the talisman in my pocket again. Just a thing I have to do. In the middle of nothing. I smile. Oh, it's the opposite of the middle of nothing. You have a funny notion of it being somewhere then, says the driver, slowing down. He points straight ahead. There it is. I can see it too. Four small, poorly maintained roads converging. There's some vegetation by the side. The driver pulls up. Okay, we're here. He frowns. What's so special about this place anyway? You locals are so fascinating. None of you knows a thing about the crossroads, and then none of you can stop asking me about why I want to go here. First the lady at the guest house who called you to get me here, then the cop who stopped us on the way, now you. Have you really never heard a thing? Heard what? That this is a place of power. These are not crossroads. They are the crossroads. The spot at their very middle is also the very middle of India. And I'll be standing there now. It's very hot to be standing there. Well, I won't be standing there long, will I? The demon will come see me, right? Wait, what demon? The demon of the crossroads. Haven't you been listening to me? If you stand at the middle of the crossroads in the middle of the day and invoke the right words, the demon of the crossroads will appear to you. And I think I've said enough. It's almost noon. How much do I owe you? Listen, there's nothing for kilometers and kilometers, not even a water pump. Do you want me to wait? Of course not, I snap. You think I want a taxi waiting for me while I meet the demon of the crossroads? How's that gonna look, huh? Okay, how will you get back then? I pause. I had not considered this. Okay, maybe wait up the road a bit where the demon can't see you. I need to make a good first impression. I'll call for you when I need you. Yes, sir. I get out and I make my way to the center of the crossroads as the car turns around. I look around me. Innocuous as anything. 4 small, unremarkable roads, typical semi-rural Indian setting, with that vegetation I noticed earlier by the side. There are also fairly generous quantities of cow dung, as well as sundry other droppings I don't recognize. Probably demon. My phone beeps. It's the alarm. It's time. It's finally time. I reach one hand into my pocket, squeeze the talisman, and with the other I begin reading out from the paper. It's a long, convoluted chant, which is why the guy who sold it to me made me swear to practice the whole thing minus the last word, so I didn't screw it up when the time came. Which was quite a lot of work to do on top of paying him all this money for the paper and that ugly talisman that hurts when you clutch it because that stupid bone thing it has jutting out of the side. But one must make sacrifices in showbiz. Scared money doesn't make money. The chant is done. I take a deep breath, awaiting what happens next. Nothing. Then I hear it, a low, whirring sound, growing louder, growling. The taxi comes back into view, the driver beaming and waving at me. As he gets to the crossroads, he rolls down his window and sticks his head out. You called, sir? It is time. No, I was chanting. What are you doing here? Go back, quickly, before the demon sees you. We are the only ones here, sir. He's right, there's nothing. Except for the sweat trickling down my face. It's ridiculously hot, even for Madhya Pradesh. Do you want to wait in the car for your demon, sir? What? Of course not. How do you think it looks to the demon if I wait in... There is an AC in the car, sir. Okay, cool, let's wait in the car. A few minutes later, we're both in there. I'm in the passenger front seat this time. The driver passes me a bottle of water. I take a draft. Demon is still not here, sir, says the driver observantly. He'll be here, I say. But for the first time, I'm starting to feel twinges of doubt. Was that guy in Delhi a scammer? On cue, the driver asks the question I'm scared to ask myself. What if the person who told you about the demon was telling you lies, sir? He wasn't, I say, with a confidence I don't feel. But how do you know? Because it's my job to know these things. This is my field of expertise. What, dealing with demons? Exactly. What is your job, sir? Bollywood talent agent. Nods the driver. We wait a bit longer. Still nothing. Except how hot it is. Even with the AC on, this weather is just ridiculous. So, what did you want to talk about to this demon, sir? Asked the driver. I wipe some sweat off my face. Just business. What kind of business? A trade. My soul for a certain deal to go through. The driver considers this. That doesn't seem great for the demon. Excuse me? I mean, he's not getting much, right? Now I'm insulted. I'll have you know my soul is worth... No. Look, sir. You'll get a whole bunch of money from your deal. What will he get? A soul? What's he going to do with a soul? He's a demon, not a priest. I'm starting to really dislike this line of inquiry. You clearly don't understand. No, make me understand, sir. What does a demon do with a soul? I turn to regard him balefully, the action sending sweat flying. It's so hot, the road isn't just shimmering, it's almost hard to look at through the glare. That's not my problem. The driver shakes his head sadly. Even he's starting to shimmer. Am I having a heat stroke? I'm not convinced, sir. Well then, driver, it's a good thing your opinion doesn't matter, isn't it? Look, sir, I'm just saying a soul doesn't seem much of a thing. What about your arm? Excuse me? Demons eat flesh, right? You could offer him an arm. It's much more appealing than a soul. I'm not giving him my bloody arm. Leg, suggests the driver. Certainly not. It'll be a soul and that's it. Look, why do you need all your limbs if you're just a talent agent? Listen, there'll be no limbs. Anyway, he isn't here. Maybe this whole thing is a mistake. Just like you said. What about a finger or a toe, sir? I look at him coldly. Are you quite finished now? Almost, says the driver. For the first time, I notice how large his teeth are as he smiles. And that's when I realize he's not shimmering, he's glowing. A deep red glow. I have one last question, says the driver. Only he's not the driver. Not anymore. I scream, reaching for the door handle. It doesn't move. I yank at it futilely. Jammed. I'm trapped in the car. I can feel my stomach knotting up. My throat is dry. The driver smiles again. Tell me, human, why do I need to buy your soul when I already have you?
It's always the demons, and they always want something expensive. I've lost so many pairs of loafers.
This one just wanted some flesh, but if you want to check out more of Shiv's work, and he really does write everywhere and get in loads of different places, which is great, the best place to really find it is on his website, which you can go to at shivramdas.net. There you can find links to everything that he's doing, upcoming, etc., etc. And if you enjoy his thoughts and expertise as much as we do, you can even cross his palms with silver on Patreon. Bang bang! Next up was Andrew Slindy.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice message system. 515-555-0123 is not available. Please leave your message after the tone. It was a rare moment of lucidity, and, as near as he could tell, they were becoming fewer and further between. Of course, when the clock on your computer screen, or cell phone, or the clock on the wall always reads 3:02 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, it was almost impossible to determine the spans between sanity anymore. He clicked the voicemail button on his computer screen and waited for the next call. That sinking feeling crept into his guts again. He knew the next call was never going to come. In the days before this strange and torturous period in which the clock only read 3:02 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, he'd have done almost anything to just sit there all afternoon and click the voicemail button. When your job involved working for minimum wage plus a paltry commission on each sale, it was really hard to care, especially when you were slinging cable services for a guy who just bought his second soccer team. Not to mention the hostility of the customers in the afternoons. No one likes a telemarketer. He shook his head to try to clear it. In a situation like this, during a period when he was lucid, there was no time to waste. He had to think. How was it possible? Or rather, how could it ever be possible that time had stopped? Not only did the clocks all share the same numerals, but events kept repeating as well. That voicemail he kept getting always had the same phone number. The girl who sat 3 desks down from him kept getting up to grab an energy drink from the break room. Since the act took more than a minute, it kept him in constant suspense over whether she'd ever gotten her afternoon pick-me-up. His boss always called over another coworker, who was notorious for his lack of personal space. Apparently his name was Kevin. Wait, apparently? Had he somehow forgotten these people had names? According to the cheap little plastic plaque on his desk, he'd been working for the company for 12 years. Surely in some life that existed outside of 3:02 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, he'd known these people's names, their hobbies. Maybe he'd even been attracted to the girl who had a serious Red Bull addiction. He was getting off topic again. All right, 3:02 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. It couldn't be possible that he'd spent days, or maybe weeks or years, stuck at 3:02 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. There was such a thing as physics. The Earth spun at a rate of 60 seconds per minute. Time was a constant. It just simply wasn't possible that all of a sudden, for no reason at all, time would suddenly stop at 3:02 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he was burned out. There'd been other afternoons that seemed like time had stopped. There were mundane Mondays, when the day simply dragged and 5 minutes felt like an hour. There were Friday evenings, when he couldn't keep his eyes off that clock, just waiting for it to strike 8 p.m. so he could pack up and go home. Home. Did he have a home anymore? He seemed to remember that there was something waiting for him. Someone who existed outside of 3:02 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. There was a photo on his desk of himself and a woman, smiling, happy. He didn't know her name anymore either. Stop. He was getting off topic again. Okay, was it possible? Was this something that was happening objectively, or was it just a hiccup in his perception? Was the madness that took him during the time stop only an illusion? He moved the cursor away from the voicemail button on the dialer's interface, mousing over the clock in the bottom right-hand corner of his screen. He clicked on it, relieved to see that the clock was ticking, 3:02:48. Relieved, he took a deep breath. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe time hadn't completely stopped, and he wasn't being forced to repeat the same minute over and over again. 3:02:56. Okay, 4 seconds left. Only 4 seconds until the clock ticked over and freed him into 3:03 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon. A time when things were okay again, when he had a life again. 3:02:59. He dry swallowed his anticipation, sure that time stopping was impossible. A cold sweat broke over him as the last second ticked. 3:02:00. Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system. 515-555-0123 is not available. Please leave your message after the tone.
Well, nearly got over the almost heart attack you gave me there, Benjamin. Tell me more about Slindy. First of all, amazing name. You can find out the story behind that on the podcast. But if you like fantasy, steampunk, and a little touch of the Wild West, you have to check out Andrew's series, Sins of the Elders. Start with Six Gun Sorcery and follow it up with A Fistful of Royals, and believe me, you're in for a time. So, enjoyed yourselves while I was locked outside, have you?
Immensely.
It's been amazing, Ysterris. I can see why you kidnapped us all those years ago and trained us up to do the job.
Has it been years?
I don't know. It's hard to tell. There are no windows here.
The Sacred Library is a strange place.
Oh, boys. You've only begun to scratch the surface. Does that make you nervous, Ben? That makes me very nervous.
I'm not okay.
Oh, I hope you're quaking in your boots, boys. You think you're ready to be story keepers? There's a lot more room for stories in here. And I want all of these shelves filled. Get cracking. Thank you all for joining us on this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on your chosen service so that you don't miss out on future episodes.
You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, where you can talk to us directly and even suggest prompts for upcoming stories.
If you're not a tweeter, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram as well. Just search for The Tiny Bookcase.
Now, if you want to support the podcast,
and we'd really appreciate it if you did,
you can do so at patreon.com/thetinybookcase.
And then you could be just as special as these story seekers.
Should we thank them?
I think so.
Well, then it's a huge thank you to the legendary Matthew McLaren and the absolutely epic Scott Byrne for their support.
Thank you for listening. Catch you next week.
Next week. Make it slimy.
Make it slimy, Nick.